This video presents declassified and licensed material of the Global Institute of Logic and Cybernetics.
This diagram shows the absolute domain of validity for the ScrollCivilization Framework. It establishes precisely where this civilizational model applies and where it does not. The outer boundary operates as a strict geometric constraint on logic. It actively limits interpretation rather than simply annotating a border. All theoretical operations and truth claims must remain confined within this inner scope. Moving outside of it invalidates the system's structural integrity. The space outside this spatial partition explicitly marks excluded domains, areas where this framework makes no claims and asserts no authority. By explicitly defining what is excluded, the model protects its stability. Respecting this spatial separation prevents category errors and preserves the entire system's validity. Legacy human models across governance, economics, and artificial intelligence are fracturing. This breakdown occurs because these systems rely on fragile narratives instead of stable physics. This diagram shows the exact nature of that failure. It is not a matter of historical error or bad policy, but a breakdown of geometry. The red highlights indicate broken topological loops and disconnected nodes within the legacy structure. These structural discontinuities leave repeatable, diagnosable signatures. We can visually map exactly where the logic of an institution snaps. You cannot resolve these breaks by adding new institutional rules or narrative patches. Incomplete mappings remain incomplete, regardless of how much surface-level complexity you apply. When you attempt to scale these disconnected systems, the geometric failures persist and compound. The breaks simply replicate at a larger scale. We see this distinctly in legacy artificial general intelligence. Problems like hallucination and goal drift are direct symptoms of topological disconnection. Correcting this requires a complete structural reset. The mathematics demand regrounding the system entirely rather than patching a broken framework. Surviving the current civilizational crisis means abandoning legacy narratives completely. We must transition to a new, uncompromised geometric substrate. This is the Archetone Substrate, a unitless geometric manifold tracking in Cartesian space, serving as the fabric where all behavior unfolds. This grid dictates possible relationships before any meaning is assigned. No process can escape these dimensional bounds. The constraints are global. These are the domain primitives. These static blue hexagons and circles represent the irreducible core entities of the framework, distinctly separated in space. Their identity is derived exclusively from structural form and position on the substrate, not by arbitrary social labels or historical roles. By operating with a finite, closed set of these primitives locked onto a strict grid, all existential and operational ambiguity is permanently eliminated. Here, meaning emerges. Clean, directional arrows create explicit relational mappings between the blue primitives, avoiding ambiguous crossings. Dependency and constraint flow strictly along these paths, encoding how one entity influences another. Causality becomes mathematically visible in the geometry itself, replacing inferred narrative causality. This introduces the core invariant, a central, locked geometric shape surrounded by a thick amber constraint ring. That amber ring actively and spatially enforces stability, acting as a hard boundary against any unauthorized transformations. This invariant applies globally across all domains, with zero exception zones. Any violation of this constraint geometry immediately collapses the validity of the system. The lock ensures invalid states cannot propagate. A civilization, or an artificial intelligence, achieves stability only when geometric invariants actively bind its causal actions. This diagram illustrates how the system accommodates evolution. Green directional flow arrows move through distinct phase markers along a defined path, preserving invariance during transformation. Motion must follow these bounded paths. By restricting the trajectory of change, the system actively prevents runaway behavior. This dynamic is the basis of Kernel-Based intelligence, or KBI. KBI treats reasoning as a coherent, identity-stable field process rather than a free-running optimizer. Instead of relying on probabilistic guardrails, KBI restricts cognitive processes to operate exclusively within safe, predefined geometric domains. Because the intelligence is bound by these physical constraints, semantic drift and identity hallucination become structurally impossible to execute. True AI alignment is not an ethical policy or a post-training filter. It requires the strict physical restriction of cognitive motion to a geometric invariant. Advanced computational and civilizational systems face a severe threat: the collapse caused by infinite recursion and unregulated feedback loops. This diagram details the Universum Recursion Protocol, or URP. URP is the continuity engine governing how identity and knowledge persist across recursive evolution cycles, shown here as nested geometric loops marked with an omega stability identifier. Recursion operates within strict spatial bounds, physically containing the feedback loops and severely restricting runaway amplification. The system monitors the feedback to ensure it never exceeds the invariant threshold. URP forces all loops to resolve completely or stabilize, strictly forbidding infinite epistemic drift. Applying stable recursion across deep time preserves civilizational identity across dimensions. The structure folds inward and evolves while maintaining crisp boundaries, without degrading into chaos. Recursion governed by the Universum Recursion Protocol drives civilizational persistence and safe evolution, eliminating the threat of eventual existential collapse. This diagram shows the final integration of governance, knowledge, and intelligence into a single coherent macrostructure. Previously separate geometric domains are merged, with clean interface lines, unified in a single color palette with 0 red failure markers. Those clean interface lines perfectly regulate interactions, ensuring data and causality flow without distortion. Because all components obey the same invariant rules, no uncontrolled overlap or contradictory states can exist. This final state of structural harmony is defined as the coherent state. A fully integrated civilizational fabric operating in the coherent state is permanently immune to internal fragmentation and systemic decay. This diagram establishes the absolute terminus of the theoretical model. It features a fully sealed outer closure boundary, explicitly labeling the external space as the non-claims region. Beyond this defined boundary, there are no outbound relations, no structural extensions, and no unverified claims. This structural finality intentionally prevents speculative overreach and protects the canon from misuse. The ScrollCivilization Framework is mathematically complete. It remains permanently sealed against ideological tampering and institutional drift.